Okay, so Adora, um, thank you so much for letting me talk to you. We're going to talk about Amaka. I'm going to ask you loads of questions about the platform. But I mean, just first of all, and people must ask you this all the time, but I mean, what led you to create it? What sort of personal experiences led you to start it, specifically for global Pan-African creators?
Thank you so much, Julian. So we started Amaka, and we started off specifically focusing on being an editorial platform for Pan African women to share and amplify their stories. And we've recently expanded our platform to a social publishing and more of a creator platform. What that entails is it allows creators to be able to create, share, amplify, and monetize their stories, and mainly monetize their stories through subscriptions and through brand partnerships. We wanted to focus on this to address key three issues around lack of representation in the media landscape. There's obviously a lot of issues, specifically in the creative world and the media world, where there aren't that many African and Black stories that are told authentically. And so we wanted to be able to address that through representation. And then through amplification and autonomy, I would say. So allowing creators to really have the autonomy over how they present their stories, how they share and distribute their narratives in a really in-depth nuanced way that we don't typically see. And then finally monetization was what drove me to really to drive this expansion, was to allow creators to be able to share their stories, but also have a sustainable income directly from their true fans or from their subscribers, as well as through brand partnerships. So again, working with various different brands, specifically fashion, beauty, lifestyle brands, and create in their own tone and their own narrative, and to work with brands that align with them, as well as to amplify and connect them to their diverse communities and audiences. So that's what really drove the ambition and strength, but specifically also helping a lot of brands who struggle with connecting with diverse audiences, diverse consumers. We've obviously seen that when you have a diverse consumer base, that you have really strong returns in growth and revenue for businesses. So helping them as well connect with creators, have a very strong relationship with diverse audiences, and providing in-depth creator solutions for brands and businesses as well.
And you spoke about representation there, Dora. I mean, how do you hope to address, the lack of diversity? You talked about it there, in the creator marketing ecosystem as it stands.
So how we aim to do that is we have on our platform various different creators from written work, video content, and wanted to be able to as well represent creators on the continent, but also in the diaspora as well. And we have a huge network, as I mentioned, of diverse creators within our ecosystem. We launched the Amaka Gigs directory, which has various different creators, influencers who are more macro to micro influencers, that have a representation in the US, the UK, and as well as key cities across Africa as well. And their whole focus was to really vet these creators, work with them who have had either a strong track record or who have a growth potential to be able to have very strong relationships with brands. And we felt that it was very, very important to have a strong ecosystem where brands and businesses can tap into creative talent, specifically when they find challenges to source the right talent, or to connect with the right audiences because they don't have the right channels. So that's how we as a platform are expanding on that, and how we've facilitated a lot of those relationships to expand on having those strong ecosystem and connections with diverse creators.
And you really do tap into them, don't you? See their names down the side, you can then follow these people. I mean, it's a true platform, isn't it, for that sort of thing?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it is.
And, how has creators or marketing evolved in fashion and beauty? These are worlds that change all the time, aren't they? What are the key trends sort of shaping it now at this moment, do you think?
Yeah, so I would say there are a lot of key trends, specifically when you have platforms like TikTok, for example. I'd say TikTok has really accelerated the growth of storytelling, specifically in creator marketing, or interchangeably influencer marketing. But I would also say that the influencer, as we know it, I think has changed beyond kind of having those thousands to millions of followers, but I think there's also a very strong emphasis on user generated content with people who may have be a bit more micro as well. So I feel like it has democratized a lot of access for large scale creators to more micro scale creators to have a stronger relationship with a lot of their communities. I think that's something that has really driven a lot of change and a lot of trends as well, um, specifically across social media. So I think that's been one of the main ways that things that we have seen. And then finally, obviously, we're going back to kind of more diversity side of things as well. A lot of people leverage a lot of these social platforms for reviews, for customer reviews. They're not just going on Google reviews anymore, but specifically people are actively going on video search, video reviews, people who look like them, whether it's from body size, skin tone, for example, to making more informed decisions in the fashion, beauty, and lifestyle space. So I think that has been a very strong trend in combining the use of social video and the micro creator as well to have a diversity of thought and diversity of perspectives for consumers to make more informed decisions in this space. So I think that's really been driving a lot of change in this.
So these influencers are getting even more influential, aren't they, as time goes on? But what sort of unique opportunities and challenges do Pan-African creators face in the global market, do you think, Adora?
Yes, so the main challenge I would say is definitely access to monetization. Um, Even though, yes, there's been increased opportunities when it comes to, there's a growing focus on representation, but it's still not enough in terms of monetization. When we speak about maybe Black creators or African creators, they're not typically, afforded a lot of opportunities to be in that space. There are a lot of studies where it shows that diverse creators are essentially paid less, sometimes about 29% less than their counterparts. And so there's a very big, I would say, just inequality in terms of when it comes to compensation, it comes to payment. And when you don't have adequate compensation and payment, it isn't a very strong barrier. It's a barrier to entry, I would say. And so then obviously it reduces the diversity in this ecosystem. So I think that's been like a very strong issue that we need to be able to address, that we need to educate brands on. And also brands need to understand that when you have a diverse pool of creators, you have a diverse pool of tapped into new consumer base as well, which obviously results in increased returns and revenue.
And as it stands at the moment, how do brands select, the most relevant creators for their campaigns? Because you said it's not just about numbers of followers anymore. I mean, it's more nuanced, isn't it?
Yes, so when we speak to a lot of brands want to specifically work with creators that have a very strong focus on kind of values or alignment. So when it comes to values, something that we always discuss as well is having brands understand their own brand value, understanding their target consumers' values, and then their ideal creators' values, and really seeing if they match and align. And if they don't match and align, then it's the messaging and finding creator fit, we typically call it, isn't going to really work if all of those values aren't aligned, because consumers are very savvy. They understand when they're being sold to, or when it's not a really genuine collaboration or connection. And so I think it's incredibly important that a lot of brands focus on that, and that's something that they do. And then obviously one of the main things is obviously not it's going beyond impressions and reach, but conversion. They want to know which kind of creators have very strong engagement, and that leads to sales and conversion. It's not no longer just about how many eyeballs have seen it, and maybe sometimes there are campaigns that focus on that, but with the really strong changes in the economy and essentially the economic downturn, a lot of brands really want to see strong return on investment with a lot of their marketing initiatives, and that really goes to the creator marketing side. So they want to specifically drill down creators that have a deep engagement with their consumers and can turn into conversion and sales.
So, I mean, it can be complicated for these brands as well if they've not sort of dealt with creators. I mean, what specific criteria do you think, brands should consider when choosing creators for these collaborations, do you think?
Yes, so as I mentioned, definitely the value alignment. I think that's something that they should definitely consider. Another thing that I think a lot of brands should have a strong consideration on is obviously um, not again focusing on aesthetics, but I think diversity of perspectives and diversity of thought as well, and body shapes, skin types as well. I think it's really important to be able to make sure you have an informed strategy that looks at who your target audience is, and is able to reflect in your creator marketing side of things as well. And the third thing that I'd also want to say is specifically on especially if you want to have strong, diverse creator marketing, is also tap into creators that may typically frequent specific events or specific cultural spaces. We believe that working with just creators isn't just enough. You need to also look at where your target audience typically going to, what are they typically listening to, and how does your chosen creator align with those specific psychographic interests. I think when you go into the crux of your specific target audience, you're able to have a very strong relationship with the creator, but then also utilize the content in a way that can be integrated organically in that space as well. And then one more thing I also wanted to share as well is I think there's a very strong focus on first person narratives. A lot of brands and businesses previously before would really invest a lot of time in these big campaigns, maybe having a very glossy creator, for example, and sometimes there isn't a really strong return on investment. So having relationships with creators that can really have a first person narrative, as if you're speaking with a friend, one on one, no frills, first person accounts. I think that is something that a lot of brands should really consider when they specifically work with creators. Like, do they have that organic relationship where it's when they're selling a product, it's not like you're selling a product, it's a genuine recommendation, I'd say. Yeah.
And like, you've mentioned engagement. That is easy to measure, isn't it? Number of views, you're looking at TikTok,
Yeah.
but I guess there's a sense that can be sometimes a bit superficial. I mean, beyond engagement, conversion. I mean, you've spoken a bit
Yes.
about this, but how important is conversion now in today's creator marketing?
Conversion is incredibly important. That is the main thing that a lot of brands that we speak to have a specific focus on, whether it's large scale brands to more emerging small scale brands. It's important because they're dealing with so many various different factors when it comes to running a business, and they want to know that what they're putting out is they'll be able to get either the same or essentially more in return. And so that has been something that has been a very strong focus as well. And also with there's been dwindling marketing budgets again, like I mentioned, because of the economic downturn, as well as if you're a new startup or a new business, you typically have very limited budgets. So it's making sure that creators can and leveraging creator marketing can not only have a very strong return on investment, but also it's not something that is so costly to the business that they're not able to scale as a brand. But it is a very core thing that they're looking for, which and it's also why people are leaning towards creator marketing as well, because it's not as expensive as high production value campaigns. It's easy to essentially connect with a creator in a more cost effective way, but I think having making sure that that conversion across the board is very important to brands.
And it's those strong, compelling narratives, isn't it? As
Yes.
you said.
Yeah.
I mean, what strategies can creators use, to drive meaningful conversions for brands, do you think?
The strategies that we typically, tell creators is that, again, it's making sure that they have a strong story that is not actively selling the brand. It's more about the benefits and the values around the brand. So, for example, if it's a skincare brand, we typically, would want a creator focus on maybe how to treat hyperpigmentation, which is something that a lot of consumers of color typically deal with. And so it's really about like having a storytelling narrative that is about helping the consumer address a specific pain point as opposed to pushing a product, and then seamlessly maybe integrating the product into the narrative. But it's really about a very effective storytelling tips, tricks, tutorials that are integrated into the consumer's daily life, where they needed to address a specific pain point, where they needed to think about how to improve themselves in a specific angle of their lives. Maybe it's something like workwear tips, for example. It's not meant to be just about me as a brand, but it's like it's the end user, like how are you benefiting them. So it's looking at the we always speak with the creators to make sure that you are actually adding specific value to your target audience when you're creating this kind of content. And also, as I mentioned, I think it's very, very important to be able to have storytelling narratives that are have a very strong relationship with the specific target intended audience. So, like I mentioned, you don't always have to have these really big high value productions. As mentioned, I think it's important to be able to have a dynamic relationship with your target audience by adding, like I said, tips and tricks, but also, like I said, first person narratives, very organic storytelling, like you're speaking with a friend, and making sure there's that form of that bond. And then lastly, the consistency side of things as well. Consistency, I think, is very important in your storytelling. A lot of consumers and brands, you're building a relationship. When you're dropping off people, there isn't a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust. There's a lack of engagement and relationship building when there's a lack of consistency. So we always ask, having brands that creators that make sure that they not only align with the target audience and as well as the target brand, but also have a consistent form of engagement in their storytelling narratives.
It's just got to be compelling, basically, hasn't it?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and like for small businesses, what are the benefits to them of using creator marketing, do you think?
Yes, so for small businesses, there are many benefits to using creator marketing. Like I mentioned, one of the main ways is more cost effective than commissioning really high value productions that typically are very difficult to measure and scale as well. Creator marketing is very scalable because you can work with micro creators, many micro creators in different target locations that have deep engagement in a highly localized way. And then there's also like I said, the reach factor, the and reach and visibility factor as well. When you're working with different creators in various different locations, you're able to tap into various different markets. And so, whereas if you're using traditional marketing, billboards, for example, or TV, for example, it's not very accessible. And so, a lot of businesses like who want to be able to leverage creator marketing is I think is very, very impactful for brands and businesses as well. And then in terms of when it comes to the effort involved as well. There is a strong relationship with obviously social medias and creator marketing as well. So looking at how do you in a lot of brands typically their default is like I'm just going to do a lot of paid media through my through my page. But one of the main things that is really great about creator marketing is that it's a human being, it's from a person of these recommendations. So backing a lot of creators through paid creator marketing, like TikTok Spark, LinkedIn thought leadership ads, for example, they typically boost a lot of the content or the ads from the creator, and it typically performs much better because a people don't like hearing from a brand or a kind of like a faceless entity, people want to know who you're speaking to. They want to know that you look like them, that you have a similar background to them. And when you boost that, it has a very strong engagement factor as well. So looking at how do you combine social with creators as well can be a very strong benefit because again of the reach factor, but also from the trust and engagement factor, especially if you put some paid behind the creator as well. So those I would say are the three main benefits for a lot of businesses.
It's just more sort of intimate, isn't it? I guess. I mean,
Yes.
what examples are there of content types that yield results for emerging brands?
So the results, I would say, we always talk about leveraging the creators and communities as your growth engine, and I say that as a form of content because the best form of content is from, like I said, having a very strong first person relationship with a creator, but also the consumer. A consumer sharing their experiences or product reviews in a very authentic way, in a way that, again, benefits the end user, is a very strong form of engagement and content that would yield high results because, again, there isn't like these filters, there isn't a these big productions where you can edit things out and change things out. People really want to get to the truth of things as much as possible, and so leveraging creators and consumers, or your customers or your community, to share their experiences, their storytelling, and their narratives, either about the product or around the product, preferably around the product, so it's not so abrasive. That is the kind of form of content that we see is very, very strong when it yields results. And then lastly, as I mentioned, utilizing the creator marketing or consumer marketing content and integrating it in cultural spaces where your target audience lives, breathes, reads, as well, and working with, maybe whether it's an event or maybe it's a black led media company or black led social platform, and integrating that content there. Those are where your audience frequent. That's where they live. It's more organic, it's more relatable. So I'd say those forms of kind of content, and those forms of that form of distribution, I think is a really strong impactful way to be able to have yield strong results. And then finally, as I mentioned, pushing and boosting creator ads through paid ads on the creator platform, again because people typically like to connect directly with creators to see the unfiltered true experiences of your brand and product.